The boy was the first to see her, a shape half buried in the Christmas snow, not moving, not breathing right, like the land itself had given up on her. The wind dragged her hair across the ice. One arm was twisted beneath her. The other reached toward nothing, like she had died asking the sky a question it never answered. Most folks would have ridden past. Out here, mercy froze faster than water. But the black rancher didn't. He slid off his horse slow, boots sinking into the drift, breath steaming through the cold morning air. He touched her wrist, then her cheek, then the blood soaking through what was left of her buckskin wrap. And that was when he heard it. A whisper so faint it could have been the dying wind itself. Please, save me. He should have walked away. Any man with sense would have. Because the girl he lifted into his arms wasn't just any Apache girl. She was the one half the territory was hunting for. So listen close. And before this story rides any further, tell us where you're watching from. Follow this tale to the end. And don't forget to subscribe. Arizona Territory, winter of 1881. She screamed. Just once. Sharp, cut short, swallowed by the snow before it could find an echo. Saul Carter reined in so fast, the mare skidded on the frozen trail. The wind carried another sound, a soft thud against stone, the kind a body makes when it loses the strength to fight gravity. He listened hard, breath steaming through the cold. Nothing moved. Not the trees. Not the ridge. Not even the night. Lord, he muttered under his breath. Not on Christmas Eve. He swung down, boots crunching through crusted snow, and scanned the ridge above. Darkness clung to the rock shelf like a crouched animal. The cold tasted metallic, bitter, the way it always did before something went wrong. Another sound, a broken inhale. Faint. Human. Saul's hand brushed the revolver at his belt, but didn't draw. The mountain didn't feel like an ambush tonight. It felt like a plea. He climbed. The slope was mean, slick stone, loose shale, wind biting through his coat. Snow slid under his palms as he hauled himself over the ledge. He stood still for a beat, letting his eyes settle. Then he saw her. A young woman lay twisted near a downed cedar, half buried in drifted white. Her dress was ripped at the hip. Blood leaked dark and slow from beneath the torn leather at her side. Her arms shook violently, wrists rubbed raw, the cuts fresh. Long black hair spilled across the snow like ink spilled on a page. Apache. The word hit him hard enough to stop his breath. He knew what the town did to men who helped Apache girls. He knew what they did to the girls first. She stirred. Barely. Just enough to let a groan escape her, thin and desperate. Her fingers twitched against the snow as if trying to claw her way back to life. Saul moved toward her before he told himself to stop. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "you hear me?" No answer, only a tremor running the length of her body. He knelt. Cold burned straight through his gloves when he touched her shoulder. Her skin was ice. Her pulse fluttered wild and weak beneath his thumb. She opened her eyes then, dark, shaking, full of terror so old it didn't need a name. She saw his face, black man, stranger, armed, and tried to push away, but her limbs gave out. Her hand caught his coat, desperate fingers clutching a fistful of fabric. Her lips parted. Please. Barely sound at all. Save me. Soul felt something inside him cinch tight. Not fear, not duty. Something older. Something he thought he buried the night he lowered his little sister into red dirt years ago. He swallowed it down. Easy now, he murmured, voice low. I got you. He pulled off his scarf, pressing it to the wound. The blood soaked through too fast. He looked around for anything to stop it. His eye caught the loop of bright red cloth he'd tied to his saddle that morning, meant to hang over the barn door for Christmas. He tore it free. The cloth was warm from the horse's flank when he wrapped it around her ribs, pulling it tight. She gasped, teeth clenching against the pain. Her breath came shallow, frantic. I know, he said. Stay with me. Lord's watching tonight. Let him find you breathing. He slid an arm beneath her knees, another behind her back. She weighed next to nothing. When he lifted her, her head slumped against his shoulder, cold cheek pressing into his collarbone. Her hair brushed his jaw, light, fragile, alive. The mare waited below, stamping nervously. Saul carried the girl down the ridge, boots slipping, heart hammering. Every few steps she shuddered like the cold was shaking her loose from the world. Don't quit, he whispered into her hair. Not tonight. Not like this. He mounted with her in his arms, holding her tight to shield her from the wind. The mare turned toward home on her own, as if she sensed what he couldn't say. The storm thickened behind them, swallowing their tracks. He felt the cross under his coat shift as he rode, tapping against his chest with each stride, steady, like a heartbeat he wished he could give to her. Please, Lord, he breathed, just let her live. Snow drifted around them like falling ash. Far off in the valley below, a church bell rang midnight. Soul held the girl closer and rode. The ride back was slow, too slow for comfort. Snow kept drifting across the trail in soft waves, filling the ruts faster than the mare could lay new ones. Saul leaned forward to shield the girl from the wind, his coat pulled tight around both of them. Her breath warmed the crook of his arm for a few seconds at a time, then faded to a thin tremble that made his stomach knot. Stay with me, he said, voice barely more than the wind's hush. A little longer. The mare's hooves thudded in a steady rhythm, 4 heartbeats that didn't belong to the dying girl in his arms. Her head rolled against his chest, hair brushing the knuckle of his jaw, cold enough to burn. He felt her pulse under the bandage, a frantic little flutter beneath the red cloth. The cloth was already stiffening with blood. Soul swallowed hard and kept riding. He chose the long road home, skirting the wagon ruts that led toward town. He didn't need a lantern swinging from some porch catching the sight of an Apache girl draped across his saddle. Stillwater didn't forgive a black man for much. harboring an Apache after dark. They'd forget Christmas quick. A gust of wind cut through the canyon, sharp as a whip. The girl shivered violently. Her fingers twitched against his coat again. Tiny, desperate movements that barely dented the fabric. "Easy," he murmured. "Ain't no one gonna touch you now." But he didn't believe it. Not yet. His cabin came into view at last. One window glowing faintly behind the snowstorm, smoke trailing thin from the chimney. A stubborn little light fighting a bigger, crueler night. "Almost home," he whispered. The mare stopped on command, sides heaving. Soul slid down and caught the girl before she could slump. Her body sagged against his chest, limp as thawing rope. He kicked the door open with his boot. Warmth hit them first, then the smell. Old wood, slow-burning cedar, a pot he'd left simmering before he rode out. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and laid her on the narrow bed by the wall. Her eyes fluttered but didn't open. He set a hand on her cheek. "Ice." He cursed under his breath. Soul shrugged out of his coat and threw another log on the fire. Flames flared up, hissing at the sudden offering. Light crawled across the walls, across the girl's face, across the crimson bandage tightening around her ribs. He peeled the red cloth back. Blood welled up so fast he had to clamp his palm over the wound. "Damn it! Don't quit on me." He grabbed the basin, dumped what water he had into it, and set it near the hearth. Steam rose in thin ghosts. He tore another strip from his shirt, clean, worn soft from years of washing, and pressed it hard to her side. She jerked awake at the pain, a sound breaking from her throat that wasn't quite a cry and wasn't quite human. Her hand shot out, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. Her eyes, dark, raw, confused, locked onto his. For a second, she didn't seem to know if he was enemy or miracle. "You're all right," Saul said, voice low and even. "You're safe here." Safe. The word felt like a lie. He said it anyway. She blinked once, trying to focus. Her lips parted, forming a word he couldn't understand. Something soft, broken, Apache tongue. Then her fingers loosened. Her head fell back. Her breath shallow, but still there. Saul wrapped the second cloth around her ribs, knotting it tight. Blood seeped through, but slower now, not the angry rush from before. He checked her temperature with the back of his hand. Too cold. Much too cold. He pulled the blanket up to her chin and hovered there a moment, watching her chest rise in small, fragile lifts. "Lord," he whispered, "you took enough from me. Don't take her too." He sat back, elbows on his knees, and stared at the fire until the heat blurred. Outside, the wind prowled along the walls, testing for cracks. Snow tapped against the shutters like fingers searching for a way in. Saul listened for a long time. The girl lay still. Too still. He reached out, hesitant, and found her hand under the blanket. It was cold at first, then warmer in his palm, like life remembering itself. She breathed, barely, but she breathed. Saul didn't let go. Just stay, he murmured to no one but the shadows. Stay till morning. That's all I'm askin'. The fire snapped, the wind answered, and Christmas crept closer, hour by hour, while Saul Carter kept watch over a stranger the whole territory wanted dead. The fire held the room together through the next long hour, its crackle the only sound steady enough to trust. Saul sat beside the bed, shoulders hunched, hands clasped as if holding the shape of a prayer he didn't know how to finish. The girl's breathing stuttered in and out, thin as thread, pulling his eyes back to her every few seconds. Her skin had warmed some, but not enough. He stood and paced once, twice. The storm clawed at the windows. Snow drifted under the door. Every gust made the lamp flicker, chasing shadows across the walls like ghosts looking for a place to settle. A knock cut through it all. 3 slow raps, measured, purposeful. Saul stiffened. His hand went to the revolver, thumb brushing the hammer. Then a voice, aged, dry, familiar. Saul? It's me. Ruth. He exhaled, set the gun down, and opened the door. Ruth Danner stepped in with the cold clinging to her shawl. Gray hair tucked under a bonnet, lines carved deep around her mouth, lines shaped more by hard truth than by time. She looked him over once, then her eyes went to the bed. "What in God's breath have you dragged in here?" she asked, already moving toward the girl. "Found her on the ridge," Saul said. "Bleeding, freezing." Ruth pulled the blanket back, revealing the torn bandage. She didn't flinch, didn't gasp, just leaned closer until her breath fogged the girl's shoulder. Apache. The word sat heavy in the air. Saul braced himself for what would come next. Ruth straightened slowly. Her face didn't change, but something in her eyes did. A hardening, a weighing, a quiet reckoning. "You bind her with that red thing?" she asked. "Only cloth I had." Ruth touched the edge of it, fingers steady. "You stopped the bleeding?" "For now." She nodded once. "Then she's alive because of you." Saul swallowed. "For now." Ruth pressed her palm to the girl's cheek. "Cold," she murmured. "Too cold. Body's been running from something. Maybe still is." She turned to Saul. "You didn't think to ride her to Stillwater?" He met her stare. "Town sees me carrying an Apache girl? They'll hang first and ask later. You know that." Ruth breathed out slow, the kind of breath that knew he was right. "And you think keeping her here will be safer?" Saul didn't answer. Ruth took a chair and sat beside the bed. Her fingers moved with practiced certainty, checking pulse, lifting the girl's wrist, pressing lightly along the ribs. "She's hurt bad," Ruth said. "Not dying, not yet, but close." The fire cracked, snapping the silence in two. Ruth looked at Saul again, and this time her voice carried no softness at all. "You planning to save her, or hand her over?" The question landed like a blow. Saul's jaw tightened. He rubbed the scar on his knuckle, a habit he never broke. "I ain't handing her to men who drag her behind a horse for sport. That's not what I asked." Sol looked at the girl, at her torn wrists, at her face young and worn in ways no winter storm could do alone. "I don't know," he said finally. Ruth stared at him long enough for the fire to spit another spark. "You need to decide before morning," she said. "Snow clears and someone sees tracks leading here. You won't get a say in it. Lawmen will knock. Hunters too, maybe worse." Sol felt the floor tilt under him, not from fear, but from memory. He'd seen what happened when a mob decided someone was guilty. His father, a neighbor once, a stranger another time. Christmas didn't soften men. Sometimes it sharpened them. Ruth leaned close to the girl, laying a hand on her sternum. She's got fight left, but she needs rest, heat, time. Time. The one thing they had the least of. Ruth stood and tightened her shawl. "I'll fetch herbs. You keep her warm. And Sol?" He met her eyes. "You brought her in," she said, voice low, even. "So whatever comes through your door next, you stand between it and her. Or you don't. No halfway in this." Sol nodded once. A nod that felt like a promise he hadn't meant to make, yet couldn't take back. Ruth stepped out into the storm, the door closing behind her with a dull thud. Silence gathered in her place. Sol moved to the bed slowly, as if any sudden motion might undo the thin hold this girl had on life. He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. Her skin twitched under his fingertip, a small, involuntary answer. "Don't you quit," he whispered. Her lashes flickered, barely. He sank into the chair Ruth had used, elbows on his knees. The fire glowed warm across her face, turning the red cloth at her ribs into a quiet, pulsing light. Outside, the wind dragged its nails across the shutters. Inside, breath and fire held on by the thinnest thread, and Sol Carter kept watch, waiting for the storm or the law to knock first. Dawn didn't rise so much as seep through the cracks in the shutters, thin and gray, like the world outside hadn't made up its mind about living another day. The fire had burned low, nothing left but a bed of sullen coals. Sol blinked awake in the chair, neck aching, coat still around his shoulders. The girl was breathing, barely, but steady. He eased forward, checking the bandage. The red cloth he'd tied hours ago had darkened, stiff with dried blood, but it held. Her skin was warmer now, still too cool, but no longer reaching for death. Sol exhaled. He hadn't realized he'd been holding that breath all night. He stood, stretched, and lit the lamp. The storm outside had passed, leaving a quiet too sharp to trust. Snow pressed against the windows in soft curves. The cabin felt small, as if the night had folded in on itself and stayed. He poured water into a tin cup and set it near the girl's hand, not expecting her to wake soon, but leaving it anyway. Habit or hope. He was pulling on his boots when someone shifted behind him. A rustle. Small. Careful. He turned. Micah stood in the doorway, hair sticking up, blanket wrapped around his shoulders like a cape against the cold. The boy blinked at the sight on the bed. First confusion, then worry, then something softer. "Who's that?" Micah whispered. "Found her in the snow," Saul said. "She's hurt." Micah stepped closer, slow as a deer approaching an open hand. "She gonna die?" "Not if we can help it." Micah nodded, the kind of nod kids used when they didn't understand but wanted to. He placed the folded blanket he'd been carrying at the foot of the bed, almost shy about it. "She looked cold," he murmured. Saul felt something tighten in his chest. "That was a good thought," he said quietly. Micah's eyes moved from the girl's face to Saul's, searching for something he didn't say aloud. Then the boy slipped back toward the kitchen, bare feet silent on the wood floor. Saul turned to the bed again. The girl's lashes trembled. A wince tightened the corners of her mouth. She didn't wake, not fully, but pain pulled her upward enough for him to see her flinch. "It's all right," he said softly. "Ain't nobody here gonna hurt you." The words felt fragile, like glass in his mouth. Fragile and dangerous. Promise carried weight he wasn't sure he could shoulder. He pulled his coat on and opened the door. Cold slashed across his face. He stepped outside to check the yard. Snow lay thick, covering yesterday's prints, but the wind had left the fence line raw. He scanned the tree line, the road from town, the trail from the ridge. Nothing moved, but something had moved during the night. Tracks, thin, half-filled by drifting snow. Not his, not Micah's, not Ruth's. Someone had ridden close enough to see the cabin smoke. Saul felt his gut tighten. He knelt, brushing snow from the prints with gloved fingers. The shape of the horseshoe was familiar, though not friendly. Lang's men, or Jed's. Hard to tell. Harder still to think either one had innocent business stopping by on Christmas morning. He stood and brushed the snow from his hands. Inside movement again. The girl thrashed once, quick, panicked. Saul crossed the room in 3 strides. Her eyes snapped open, dark, wide, wild. She didn't recognize the cabin, didn't recognize him. Fear locked every muscle in her body. "Hey," Saul said gently, hands raised. "Easy now. You're safe." She tried to sit up. Pain pitched her forward, breath catching like something sharp had gone through her. She pressed an arm to her wounded side and stared at him, chest rising in fast, shallow bursts. "No one's gonna touch you," Saul said. "Not here. Not while you're under my roof." She blinked. Slow, distrustful. Her gaze moved over his face, his coat, the room, the door, calculating everything she didn't know and every danger she did. Saul stepped back. "Drink if you can," he said, nodding toward the cup. "You'll need it." She didn't move. Not at first. Then her fingers, trembling, reached for the tin. She sniffed the water like an animal unsure of a trap. Only after Saul turned away did she take the first small sip. Her voice, when it came, was barely there. "I leave," she whispered. "I go. No trouble." "You ain't going anywhere," Saul said. "You can't stand on that leg, much less walk." "I leave," she repeated, breath shaking. "Men come, kill you for me." Sol's jaw tightened. "Let me worry about men." She looked at him then, full, searching, like she didn't trust him, but wanted to believe him more than she could afford to. She lay back slowly. Sol placed a hand on the doorframe, staring at the faint tracks vanishing in fresh snow. "Micah's here," he said quietly. "Boy deserves not to see trouble walk through his house." The girl's eyes softened at that. Just a flicker, barely there. A knock from the yard made them both freeze. Not a loud knock. Not yet. More like someone testing the wood of the porch with the heel of a boot. Sol's hand dropped to the gun at his belt. The girl's breath went silent. Micah peeked out from the kitchen, wide-eyed. Sol glanced at them both, then at the door. "New rule," he said under his breath. "You stay out of sight, and you don't make a sound." The girl didn't nod. Fear did it for her. The knock came again, firmer this time. Sol moved toward the door, and the cabin, warm moments ago, felt suddenly too small for the danger pressing against it. The knock didn't come again. Not for a long half-minute that stretched tight enough to snap. Sol stood with his hand on the doorframe, still as a cut post. He listened. Breath held, heart thudding slow and heavy. Behind him, the girl's breathing had gone thin, the kind a wounded creature makes when it's trying not to be heard. Micah ducked behind the table, eyes too wide for a boy his age. The porch creaked. Just once. A shift of weight. A man turning away. Then silence. Not safety. Just the quiet that comes before more trouble. Sol waited until even the wind sounded unsure, then cracked the door open an inch. The cold rushed in first. Snowflakes spun in the air like ash drifting from a fire. The yard was empty. Whoever had been standing there hadn't come to talk. Or knock proper. They just needed to know the cabin was awake. He stepped out onto the porch, boots sinking into new snow. Something caught his eye immediately. Half-melted depressions near the fence. Not clean hoof prints, but enough. Someone had been circling. Sol crouched, brushing away the top layer. The prints were fresh. An hour, 2 at most. Not Ruth's old mare. Not the male rider. A heavier horse shod different. More than one pass around the fence, too. Watching. Waiting. He straightened slowly. Not Apache. Not bandits. Town men. And town men didn't ride out on Christmas morning unless they were hunting something they weren't supposed to. He shut the door behind him, locking out the cold but not the truth. Micah whispered from behind the table, "Was it law?" "Don't know yet," Sol said. "Is it about her?" Sol didn't answer. Silence was answer enough. He grabbed a broom and swept the snow by the threshold, erasing the tracks the stranger's boots had left. Every stroke made the knot in his chest pull tighter. Trouble didn't lurk quiet unless it had plans. He went to the barn next, boots crunching through the drifts. The horses shifted inside, restless but not spooked. Sol checked the far fence, then the gate. Snow piled against it in uneven ridges. Someone had leaned there. He saw Tom before he heard him. The ranch hand came around the corner, scarf pulled to his eyes, hat rimed with frost. He spoke low, a little breathless. "Boss," Tom said. "You see the riders?" Soul stiffened. "How many?" "Just one I caught. Might have been more earlier. Someone rode the north line. Slow. Too slow." Tom spat into the snow, the steam rising fast. "Ain't a thief. Thieves don't stop to stare at fence posts." Soul's jaw ticked. "Lang?" he asked. Tom hesitated. "Could be. Or Jed. Hard to say with the storm." The girl's face flashed in Saul's mind. The terror when she woke, the blood soaking through the red cloth, the scars on her wrists. She'd run from something. And it sure as hell wasn't a snowbank. Saul wiped snow from his gloves. "Listen close. You saw nothing. Heard nothing." Tom nodded once. Quick, loyal. "Micah knows?" he asked. "He knows enough. You want me to fetch Ruth?" "She ain't to be seen near here for a while," Saul said. Tom's gaze sharpened. "So it's that kind of trouble." "Looks that way." Snow shifted on the roof with a soft thump, like the sky dropping another warning. Saul fixed the latch on the barn door, sweeping away fresh hoofprints leading up to it. Then he brushed the trail behind him on the way back to the cabin. Every step, like a man erasing the present before it turned into evidence. When he walked inside again, the heat hit him hard. The girl lay where he'd left her. Her eyes were half open now, unfocused, drifting. Sweat glistened along her hairline despite the cold outside. Fever. Micah sat beside her bed, holding the blanket she'd dropped earlier. At the sight of Saul, the boy looked up. "They ain't gone, are they?" Micah whispered. "No," Saul said quietly. "They'll be back." Micah swallowed. "For her? Maybe for all of us." The girl moaned softly. Nothing sharp. Just the low, helpless sound pain makes when it crawls deeper than bone. Saul touched her forehead. Hot. Too hot. She tried to move away, instincts fighting sense, but her strength failed before her will did. "Easy," Saul said. "Storm's past. You're inside now." Her lips shaped words he couldn't understand. Not English. Not any tongue he knew. But the fear, he knew that. He'd seen it in refugees he'd carried off battlefields, in mothers clutching children who didn't survive the night, in his own reflection once long ago. "We're settin' rules," Saul said softly, as if saying them aloud could make them real. "Stay inside. Stay quiet. No strangers at the door. No fire showing through the window." Her eyes fluttered, barely catching his voice. Micah tightened the blanket around her. "Pa Saul," he whispered. "We gonna keep her safe, right?" Saul looked at the door, at the snow erasing tracks he knew would be made again, at the girl whose breathing sounded like a candle fighting for its last inch of wick. "Yeah," he said, and it was both promise and prayer. "We'll try." Night came down fast, the kind that didn't bother with dusk, just swallowed the light whole. The cabin shrank with every hour, as if the walls leaned inward under the weight of what Saul refused to say out loud. The girl's fever climbed. It didn't build slow, didn't warn. It took her. One moment she was shivering, the next, heat rolled off her like she'd swallowed fire. Her breath rasped in short, broken pulls, her fingers twisted in the blanket, searching for something she'd already lost. Ruth returned near sundown, snow clinging to her boots and the smell of pine on her coat. Saul didn't need to speak. The look on his face was enough. Ruth's jaw tightened. "Move," she said, already setting her bag on the table. Saul stepped aside. Ruth pressed a palm to the girl's forehead and hissed through her teeth. "She's burning." Infections set in. Micah hovered near the stove, hands clenched, trying not to tremble. "Water," Ruth ordered. "Boil it. Now." Saul pushed the kettle into the flames. His hands weren't steady. He kept them moving anyway. Ruth cut the bandage loose, and the smell hit first. Sour, angry, the scent of flesh losing its fight. The wound had swollen, skin tight and angry red where it should have been soft. The girl cried out when Ruth touched it. The sound tore through the room, sharp, ragged, too close to the sound Saul had heard on the ridge. "It's all right," Ruth said, firm. "I know it hurts. Breathe." She thrashed. Saul reached for her hand without thinking. Her fingers latched onto him like a drowning grip, nails digging into his wrist. "Hey, easy," he murmured, leaning close. "I'm here. Ain't letting you go." Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused, fever bright. She looked straight at him and through him, as if seeing something that wasn't the cabin at all. Ruth soaked a cloth in hot water and began cleaning the wound. The girl screamed once, short, strangled, then gasped for air like the pain had knocked the breath from her lungs. Micah flinched. Saul didn't. He'd heard that sound too many times in too many wars. "Hold her," Ruth said. Saul tightened his grip around the girl's shoulders, steady but gentle. She writhed, teeth clenched, breath breaking in short bursts. "You got her," Ruth muttered. "Good. Don't let her twist." "I won't." Ruth worked quick. Cloth, water, pressure. Saul didn't look away, not even when she cut away dead skin. His jaw locked, muscles ticking as the girl screamed into his coat. "Saul," Ruth said without looking up. "This infection runs deep. She might not last the night." Micah made a small sound, fear trying to keep quiet. Saul's voice dropped low. "She's making it. That's it." Ruth didn't argue, but she didn't agree either. The girl's eyes rolled back, her grip tightening until Saul felt her strength failing, finger by finger. "Stay," he breathed. "Don't leave now." Her lips moved, dry, cracked, shaking. A word slipped out, mangled by fever. He didn't understand it, didn't need to. Ruth bandaged her again, fresh cloth wrapped firm. "She needs medicine," Ruth said, voice flat with truth. "Real medicine. Carbolic, laudanum. We don't have it. Sol knew what she meant before she said it. You'll need the trading post, Ruth continued. 20 miles, maybe more in the snow. Micah looked up sharply. You can't go, men are out there. I know, Sol said. Ruth fixed him with a stare. If you leave, you might not get back. If you stay, she might die. The room went still. Sol glanced at the door, at the dark window, at the fire barely keeping the night back, at the girl burning alive in his hands. She ain't dying here, he said. Ruth's eyes softened a fraction. Just a fraction. Then be quick. Micah stepped forward, voice trembling. Pa, Sol, don't leave me. Sol knelt to the boy's height, put a hand on his shoulder. I'll come back. He didn't say I promise. Too many promises buried in the ground. And her? Micah whispered, glancing at the bed. Sol looked at the girl, face flushed, lips shaking, chest rising in desperate, uneven pulls. She'll hold, he said. I'm asking her to. The girl made another sound, barely audible. Ruth brushed hair from her face. She's fighting, Sol, but fever steals fast. Every minute counts. Sol stood, grabbed his coat and rifle. The girl's hand twitched toward him, weak, lost, reaching. He went to her side one last time and touched her fingers. I'm coming back, he murmured. Don't go where I can't follow. Her lids fluttered. Just once. Then the fever dragged her under again. Sol stepped into the night. The cold hit like a slap. The dark road waited. Behind him, the girl gasped for breath she couldn't hold. And Sol Carter rode into the storm, for a stranger the world wanted dead, and a life hanging by a thread he refused to cut. The storm hadn't even cleared its voice when the knock came. Not frantic, not polite. Just 3 firm raps, clean, practiced, the way lawmen knock when they already know what they're looking for. Ruth froze with the cloth in her hand. Micah's breath caught. The girl lay half-conscious, skin burning, eyes drifting under swollen lids. Sol wasn't home, and that truth hit the room like a falling beam. Ruth set the cloth down, steadying herself. Micah, she whispered, get under the table. Now. But go. The boy scooted behind the stacked crates, blanket pulled over his legs. His small hands gripped the edge, knuckles white. The knock came again, harder this time. Ruth swallowed and stepped toward the door. Her fingers hovered over the latch. A voice slipped through the wood, thin as a knife edge. Ranch looks busy for Christmas mornin'. Lang. Ruth's eyes shut for half a second. Deputy Lang wasn't the worst man Stillwater had bred, but he was the kind who liked rules more than mercy. He didn't mind breaking a skull if the law gave him the slightest shade of permission. Beside him, no doubt, would be Jed. Jed spoke little. His eyes did the talking, and they talked ugly. Ruth lifted the latch. The door creaked open. 2 horses stood behind the men, breath fogging in the cold. Lang leaned one shoulder on the frame, tipping his hat back to see inside. Mornin', Miss Danner. His gaze slid past her. Didn't expect company. Ruth blocked the doorway with her body. Storm's bad. I came to check on the boy. Lang's eyes flicked around the room, sharp and hungry. Where's Carter? Out mending a fence, Ruth answered flatly. Storm brought half the north line down. Lang's boot scuffed the step. Funny thing, tracks show a second rider last night, and one set coming up from the ridge. Looked panicked. Jed stepped closer, sniffing the air like a coyote. His gaze landed on the table, on the leftover steam from boiling water, on the medical cloths. Lang noticed. His eyes narrowed. Somebody's bleeding. Ruth didn't breathe. Saul cut his hand, she said. Axe slipped. Lang stared at her. Too long. Too still. Inside the cabin, the girl stirred. A soft sound escaped her. Small, lost. The noise of someone fighting fever in the dark. Jed's head turned fast. What was that? Ruth stepped forward, blocking their view again. Wind caught the chimney, makes the old walls groan. Lang didn't blink. Behind Ruth, the girl shifted again, just enough to knock a cup from the bedside. It hit the floor with a sharp crack. Jed's hand went for his revolver. What are you hidin'? Ruth's face didn't move, but something in her eyes turned iron. A sick boy who doesn't need two men stomping through the cabin. Let us in, Lang said quietly. No, Ruth answered. Just that one word. Final. Cold. Lang's jaw flexed. He didn't like being told no. Not by a woman. Not by anyone. Ruth held the door with both hands now, shoulders squared. You want coffee? I'll bring some to the porch, but you ain't coming in. Jed's gaze darted toward the window, toward the shadows inside, toward danger he could smell but not see. Lang raised a hand, stopping him. He studied Ruth for a long, uncomfortable moment, calculating, measuring, weighing sin against suspicion. Finally, he spoke. We'll be back tonight. It wasn't a warning. It was a promise. Lang tugged his reins, and the two horses turned, snow crunching under hooves as they rode off. Slowly, deliberately, the pace of men who wanted their absence to sting. Ruth shut the door the moment they passed the fence. Not gently, not quietly. She braced both palms against the wood, breath shaking, shoulders trembling with the weight of what almost happened. Micah crawled out from behind the crates. Miss Ruth, they know? They know enough to keep sniffing, she said. She went to the girl. Fever had dragged her deeper into delirium. Sweat soaked her hairline. Her lips moved in some prayer Ruth couldn't understand. It's worse now, Ruth murmured. If Saul doesn't get back with medicine. Micah's eyes shone, scared and small. What do we do? Ruth hesitated. Just a beat. Then she grabbed the rug beneath the bed and yanked it aside, revealing a wooden hatch cut neatly into the floorboards. We hide her, Ruth said. We buy time. Micah stared. That's where Saul keeps tools. That's where we'll keep her alive, Ruth corrected. As she lifted the hatch, warm air spilled from the dark space below. Enough room for a body, barely. Enough to conceal breath. Maybe. The girl moaned again. Ruth's jaw set. "Hold on, child," she whispered. "The world's knockin', and we ain't ready to let it in." And somewhere on the road, miles away, Saul Carter rode hard into the open desert, unaware the law had already come to his door and would come again with more than questions. The cabin felt smaller after Lang left, as if the air itself had learned to hold its breath. Ruth stood over the open hatch, the dark beneath her feet yawning like a second chance no one trusted. Snow hissed against the window. The girl's fevered breaths rattled like paper. Micah hovered beside the bed, clutching the blanket he'd brought earlier, eyes darting between Ruth and the hole in the floor. "Is she gonna fit?" he whispered. "She has to," Ruth said. She slid her arms under the girl's shoulders, but the moment she lifted, the girl cried out, a soft, broken sound. Fever dragged her in and out of awareness like a tide trying to reclaim her. Ruth steadied her. "Easy now. I ain't hurtin' you. We just keepin' you out of sight." The girl blinked up at her, eyes glassy but pleading without language. Ruth's voice softened. "It's all right, child. World outside ain't worth facin' yet." Micah moved in to help, small hands gripping the edge of the blanket as they eased the girl toward the hatch. Her leg jarred and she gasped again, head falling against Ruth's chest. "Hush," Ruth whispered. "You're safe." Safe. A word too thin for the danger pressing against the door. They lowered her carefully into the hollow space beneath the cabin. The darkness wrapped around her, swallowing her shape until only her fingers remained grasping the edge of the floorboards, fragile, trembling, refusing to disappear. Ruth touched the girl's hand. "You hold on," she said quietly. "Saul's coming back, and he'll fight harder than any lawman breathin'." Micah bit his lip. "Miss Ruth, if they come back while she's down there." Ruth paused. "Then we do as we must." The boy swallowed hard. "Lie?" "Protect," she corrected. "Folk call it what they want. Lord knows what's right." She gently placed the girl's hand back inside, lowering it into the dark. When Ruth pulled the hatch closed, the click sounded like a verdict. The cabin went still. Micah sat on the floor beside the hidden space, legs crossed tight, head bowed like he was guarding a grave. "She's scared down there," he said. "She's alive down there," Ruth replied. A gust slammed the shutter, making both of them jump. Night had fully settled over the ranch, thick, cold, expectant. Ruth began packing herbs into small bundles, pacing with purpose, but her jaw clenched in a way Micah had never seen. "Lang'll be back with more men," she said. "He smelled something he liked. Jed, too." Micah shivered. "You think they know she's Apache?" "They know enough." Ruth paused. "Enough to look closer next time." She moved to the window, pushing the curtain aside a hair. The snow had stopped falling, but the moonlight made the yard bright as bone. Tracks still scarred the edge of the fence line. Half covered, but there. "What if Saul doesn't come back soon?" Micah asked. "He will." "How you know?" Ruth's eyes softened. "Because he's the kind of man who don't quit once he starts saving somebody." Micah let the words settle. Ruth knelt beside him. "Listen to me. If they come back, you stay quiet. Don't open that hatch unless I say so. And no matter what Lang asks." "I don't know nothin'," Micah recited. "That's right." Under the floor, the girl murmured, a small, pained whisper of a sound. Not words, not a cry, just a breath fighting to stay inside a body that had been too close to the edge for too long. Ruth pressed her palm to the hatch, the wood warm beneath her hand. "Hold steady," she whispered, unsure if the girl could hear her. "Saul's out there risking his hide for medicine. Don't make it for nothing." Micah mirrored her gesture, placing his little hand beside hers on the floorboard. "She's gonna make it," he said stubbornly. Ruth closed her eyes. "From your mouth to God's ear." A distant sound drifted through the night. Hoofbeats. Far off, hard to read. Coming or going, Ruth couldn't tell. Micah tensed. "Is that Saul?" "Could be," Ruth said. "Could be someone else." She blew out the lamp, plunging the room into fire-lit shadow. We wait. Minutes dragged long. The wind changed direction. A dog barked in the far pasture. Then silence again. Micah leaned close. "Miss Ruth?" "Why are we helping her?" Ruth studied the dark window, the world beyond it waiting to judge them all. "Because most folk forget," she said, "that mercy ain't supposed to ask permission first." Micah nodded, small but certain. Ruth listened to the night, to the storm's ghost still clinging to the wind, to the shallow breaths beneath the floor. Then she placed her hand on the latch of the hatch, not opening it, just resting there like a promise she wasn't sure she had the right to make. "Hold on, girl," she whispered. "Hold on till Saul finds his way back." And miles away, in the cold black desert, Saul Carter pushed through the dark, medicine in his coat, blood on his sleeve, and no idea what waited at his door when he finally returned. Saul returned just before dawn, hooves crunching, breath ragged, blood dried stiff on his sleeve. The medicine clutched tight in his fist like a prayer he'd stolen from the edge of hell. Ruth threw the door open before he reached it. One look at him, wild-eyed, exhausted, half-frozen, and she grabbed the reins. "You get it?" Saul lifted the tin and the roll of linen. Carbolic, enough to buy her time. Ruth didn't waste a word. "Inside. Now." He stumbled in, boots shaking off ice. The cabin felt warmer than he remembered, but too quiet. Wrong quiet. Ruth's face told him before Micah did. "She's worse," Ruth said. Saul crouched beside the hatch. His hands trembled as he lifted it. Heat hit him first. Wet, fever heat rising from the darkness. Her breath drifted up in thin, broken puffs. She curled on her side, sweat beading along her hairline, skin flushed red where life clung stubbornly. "Aya," Soul whispered before he realized he'd spoken her name. One Ruth hadn't told him, one he'd never heard. It simply rose in him like something old that remembered itself. Her eyelids twitched. He reached down, sliding his arms under her shoulders. She flinched weakly, but didn't fight. She couldn't. Fever had hollowed her out too much. "Easy now," he murmured. "We're getting you up." They lifted her from the hatch. The cold air hit her face and she gasped, clinging to Saul's coat with the strength of a child. Ruth laid her on the bed while Saul tore open the tin. The sharp sting of carbolic filled the room instantly. When the liquid touched her wound, Aya arched in pain, the sound tearing from her throat, thin and desperate. Saul caught her hand. She gripped his so tight her nails cut skin. "It's all right," he said, voice low, steady. "Hold on, just hold on." The fever fought back hard. Aya muttered words in her language, short, frantic syllables, the rhythm of someone begging a ghost. Ruth worked quickly, cleaning the wound, dressing it with fresh linen, wiping sweat from her cheeks. "It'll hold," Ruth said at last, tying the knot. "But she needs rest. No more moving her." Aya's breathing slowed, ragged but stronger than before. For a moment, the room settled. Then her hand moved, weak, searching. She brushed Saul's sleeve, fingers fumbling until they found the small leather pouch hidden inside his coat. Not his. Hers. She tugged at it. Ruth frowned. "What's she grabbin'?" Saul eased the pouch free. Aya shook her head, whispering something he couldn't hear. Then, with what little strength she had, she pushed the pouch into his palm and closed his fingers around it. "Keep," she breathed. Saul opened it. Inside lay a folded hide map, worn, creased, stained with travel and fear. Lines carved by hand, territory marks, and at the bottom, pressed flat between two pieces of thin leather, a land contract. Saul's vision tightened. He knew the signature on it. Jed Crowder. Tied to Lang's office. Tied to half the trouble in the valley. Behind him, Ruth inhaled sharply. "Lord, help us." Aya forced her eyes open. She looked at Saul with more clarity than she should have had in her state. "No give," she whispered. Saul knelt beside her. "No one's taken this from you." She shook her head weakly. "If they know, I die." Micah, wide-eyed, whispered from the corner, "Is that why they're looking for her?" Ruth answered before Saul could. "Yes. That map shows every piece of land Jed stole and every lie he told about Apache raids to cover it. If this gets out," she swallowed, "it ruins men who don't deserve power." Aya's breath hitched. "Hide." "I will," Saul said. Aya held his gaze. Fever had burned fear into something else. Something like trust bruised into shape. She whispered one last word before her strength gave out. "Please." Saul stood slowly, the map heavy in his palm. Heavy with truth. Heavy with danger. Ruth crossed her arms, voice low. "You keep that. You're picking a fight with the law. Sol looked at Aya, shaking under the blanket, fighting for each breath, hunted by men who had no right to her blood. I ain't picking it, he said. It already came here. Ruth nodded once, a grim acceptance. What now? She asked. Sol folded the map and slid it deep into his coat. Now we give this to someone who won't bury it for Jed. And Aya? Ruth asked. Sol glanced at her, at the bruised wrists, the fevered cheeks, the quiet breath that refused to quit. She stays, he said, under my roof, under my watch. Micah stepped closer. Pa Sol, you gonna protect her? Sol didn't answer. He didn't need to. Outside, the wind shifted. Hoofbeats echoed in the distance, coming closer. Aya stirred, whispering a word he didn't know. But Sol understood the meaning anyway. Danger was on its way, and he was out of places to run. Night settled over the ranch with a heaviness that didn't belong to weather. No storm, no wind, just a stillness that waited. Sol didn't like stillness. He kept checking the window, the door, the yard, every shadow that didn't move, every one that moved too much. Ruth fed the fire in the stove, and Micah sat near Aya's bed, fingers curled around the blanket like he was holding her to the world. Aya slept thinly. Fever softened but not gone. Her breaths shallow. Every exhale sounded like a decision. Keep her warm, Sol muttered, pacing the length of the cabin. Already doing that, Ruth said. You wearing a hole in the floor don't help. Sol didn't stop. Couldn't. The map weighed against his ribs like a loaded gun. Aya had murmured another word earlier, half asleep. Jed. He didn't tell Ruth. Didn't have to. Trouble had a name, and that name had been sniffing around the fence line. A sharp crack snapped through the quiet. Wood splintering. Sol spun toward the window. The barn glowed orange. Flames climbed the outer boards, licking up the side like hungry fingers. Smoke rolled into the sky in a thick black column. Ruth cursed. They said it. Micah froze. The horses! Sol grabbed his coat and rifle in one motion. Stay inside. I'm coming. No! Sol barked, the kind of tone that cut. You open that door again, only if I'm the one knocking. He didn't wait for argument. He barreled outside. The cold slapped him, and the heat met it halfway. Sparks drifted across the yard like burning snowflakes. The flames had already eaten a hole through the barn wall. Sol ran for the water trough and overturned the bucket into the snow, scooping what he could. The fire hissed, but the flames grew, feeding on dry cedar and old hay. He pulled the barn door open, smoke punching him in the face. The horses screamed. He shouted their names, voice raw, guiding them out through the haze, coaxing, pushing, kicking doors open with his boot. One by one they burst into the yard, wild-eyed and staggering. But the fire didn't stop. It caught the hayloft. Then the rafters. Then the whole side of the building roared up like night had opened a mouth. When the heat forced him back, Sol heard something behind him. A twig snapping. Careless, close. He turned fast, rifle up. Someone moved at the edge of the corral, slipping between shadows. "Jed!" Soul shouted into the dark. "You show your face, you coward!" No answer. Just the faint sound of a man's boots crunching snow where sound shouldn't be. He fired a warning shot. The echo cracked across the valley. The shadow ducked away. Not gone, just out of sight. Soul's eyes searched the ridge, the fence, the black spots between the flames. "I see you trying to smoke me out, but you ain't taking her." The only reply was the pop of burning timber. Then, a scream came from the cabin. Not the girl's, Micah's. Soul ran. He tore across the yard, boots sliding, breath burning. The cabin door flew open before he reached it. Ruth stood there, pale as ash. "She's awake," Ruth gasped. "She heard something. Said she knows that voice." Soul pushed past her. Aya sat upright in the bed, shaking, eyes wide, fear clearing the fever like cold water thrown on flame. She pointed to the window with a trembling hand. "Jed," she breathed. He was there." Soul felt his stomach turn to stone. Micah clung to her blanket. "What does he want?" Aya's voice cracked. "Me." Soul backed toward the door, rifle raised again. "He ain't getting you," he said. The fire outside roared louder, like the night cheering the destruction. Ruth grabbed his arm. "This fire's no random act. They're driving you out." "I know. You can't leave her. They'll take her the second you step away." "I know." He swallowed hard. Every choice felt wrong. Every path led to danger. Aya swayed, gripping the bedpost. "You go," she whispered. "Save Ranch." Soul shook his head. "Not leaving you." "You must," she said, desperate. "Fire spreads. Jed waits. No want death for you." Soul stepped closer, voice low and sharp. "Listen to me. Jed wants what you carry, and what you saw. That's why he set the fire. Not to kill the ranch." He looked at the flames reflecting in her eyes. "But to make me choose." The cabin trembled as something collapsed in the barn. Ruth's breath caught. "Soul, you gotta act." Another sound tore into the night. A child's shout. Short, muffled, cut off too fast. Micah wasn't beside the bed anymore. The door to the back of the cabin still swung open, snow blowing in, footprints, small, fresh. Ruth's voice went hoarse. "Soul, they took him." The map in Saul's coat suddenly weighed enough to break bone. Aya whispered the truth before anyone else could. "Jed, trade me for boy." A coldness washed through Saul, hotter than the fire outside. He chambered around. "No," he said. "They picked the wrong child." And he stepped into the burning night. Not to save livestock, not to save land, but to bring back the only boy who'd never once left his side. The night swallowed Saul whole as soon as he stepped off the porch. Cold, sharp, merciless, wind carrying the burn of smoke and fear. He moved fast, boots cutting through snow, rifle tight against his shoulder. The fire behind him cracked like bones splitting. Sparks drifted across the yard, embers trying to mark the path he no longer needed. Micah's tracks were clear, small, straight, dragged in places. A second set of tracks pressed alongside, bigger, heavier, deliberate. Jed. Saul followed them past the corral, past the dead garden rows, past the shadow of what used to be the barn. Every few yards, something caught the firelight. A scrap of cloth, a bent twig, a scuff in the snow. Then he saw it. A torn strip of red fabric lying on the ground, fluttering weakly in the heat of the burning barn. The same ribbon he'd used to bind Aya's wound. The one Micah had used as a marker when feeding the horses. Now ripped. Left for him. A message. Saul picked it up, fingers tightening around the cloth until the edges bit into his palm. A low, dangerous sound slid out of him. Not anger, not fear, something older. He shoved the cloth into his coat and kept moving. The tracks led toward the creek bed, the one cut deep after last spring's floods. The closer he got, the quieter the world seemed to grow. Even the crackle of the fire behind him faded. Then he heard it. A whimper, cut short. A child trying not to cry. "Micah," Saul hissed. No answer. Just the whisper of boots sliding in snow. Saul crept forward, hugging the shadows. The moon slid from behind a cloud long enough to draw shapes across the creek. Shapes that shouldn't be there. 3 figures. Jed, a hired man in a gray coat, and Micah. The boy sat on his knees in the snow, hands tied in front, head shaking with silent sobs he tried to hide. Jed held him by the collar like a dog that had misbehaved. Saul's chest tightened until breathing felt like sin. He stepped out of the shadows. Jed's head lifted instantly, wolf smile stretching thin. "There he is," he drawled. "Took you long enough, Carter." Saul leveled the rifle. "Let him go." Jed nudged Micah forward with his boot. "Now why would I do that?" Boy walked where he shouldn't. Saw something he shouldn't. Micah sniffed hard, trying to be brave. "Pa, Saul." "I'm here," Saul said. "I ain't going nowhere." Jed chuckled. "See? There's your problem. You don't know when to walk away. Should have left that girl on the ridge." Saul's grip tightened. "You ain't saying her name." "Why not?" Jed kicked snow at Micah's knees. "She ain't anybody. Just a piece of trouble got loose." Saul raised the rifle a little higher. Jed didn't flinch. "You want the boy?" Jed asked calmly. "Bring me the girl, alive. I'll trade." Saul didn't answer. Jed leaned down and gripped Micah's face, forcing the boy to look at him. "Hear that? Your pa's thinking. That ain't a good sign for you, kid." Micah cried out as Jed yanked his collar. Saul's voice dropped low. "Take your hand off him." Jed grinned wider. "Or what? You gonna shoot with the boy in front of me? You got a clean angle? You willing to risk hitting him?" Saul didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Didn't answer. Jed clicked his tongue. Didn't think so. Micah trembled. A small, broken sound escaped his throat. Nothing dramatic. Nothing loud. But enough to crack something inside Saul. He spoke quietly. Deadly quietly. You picked the wrong ranch. The wrong night. The wrong child. Jed laughed. And you picked the wrong enemy. He drew his gun. But Aya's voice cut through the night before he could aim. Stop! It wasn't strong, wasn't loud, but it carried. Saul turned. She stood at the top of the ridge, wrapped in a blanket, legs trembling, breath sharp with pain. The fire behind her made her look almost ghost-like. Ruth was nowhere in sight. Aya must have slipped out when Saul ran. Jed's eyes lit up. Well now, look at that. Aya took one step forward, barefoot, shaking, fever not gone, but standing. For the boy, she whispered, take me. Micah screamed, no! Saul felt the world tilt. Aya, don't. Jed's grin went feral. That's the deal I wanted. Aya's knees buckled, but she caught herself on a rock, jaw tight with something between terror and resolve. Jed jerked Micah's collar. Bring her down. Aya took another step. Saul moved faster. He came between her and the creek bed, rifle raised, breath tearing out of him like he'd been shot. You ain't touching her. Not tonight. Not ever. Aya looked at him, eyes wide, terrified, pleading. I give myself, she whispered. Let boy go. No, Saul said. No deals with devils. Jed cocked his gun. Last chance, Carter. Your ranch or the kid. But he didn't finish. Because Saul fired first. A warning shot, clean, close, shattering the branch near Jed's shoulder, exploding bark into the air. Jed jerked back, startled. Micah scrambled out of his grip. Aya collapsed into Saul's arms as he surged forward, dragging her behind a fallen tree. Jed recovered fast, too fast. He grabbed Micah again, this time with a blade at the boy's neck. Enough, Jed roared. Bring her or he dies. Aya sobbed once. Saul felt her shake against him. Micah looked at Saul with wide, terrified eyes. Pa, Saul, please. Saul lifted his rifle again. His voice sounded nothing like the man he used to be. You want to trade, Jed? He said. Trade with me. Jed barked a laugh. What the hell you got I want? Me. The creek went dead silent. Even the wind stopped to listen. Aya grabbed Saul's coat with her remaining strength. No, no. Micah shook his head so hard the blade nicked his skin. Jed tilted his head. You ain't worth half of what she is. Saul's eyes didn't move, didn't blink, didn't soften. You want someone strong enough to torture? He said quietly. Someone who won't die easy. Someone who'll make you feel powerful. He stepped forward once. I'm right here. Jed hesitated, just long enough. And in that hesitation, Saul saw the only opening he'd get. Jed wasn't after justice. or law, or land. Jed wanted control, wanted power, wanted fear. And Saul had none left to give. Not tonight. Not while Micah knelt in the snow. Not while Aya clung to the last thread of her courage. Not while the ranch burned behind him. Jed spat. "Bring me the girl, Carter. That's the only language I speak." Saul lowered the rifle barrel an inch. A calculated inch. "Then learn a new one," he said. They reached town just as the sky bruised into dawn. Jed dragged Micah down the main street, blade hard at the boy's throat. His hired men flanked him. Lang and 3 deputies waited on the courthouse steps, boots planted wide, guns unholstered. Sol and Aya came slower. Aya leaned into him, blanket wrapped tight, breath thin, legs trembling with fever that hadn't finished with her. But she walked. She didn't let him carry her. Pride or fear, maybe both. The crowd parted, not kindly, just cautious. "Black rancher bringing an Apache? On Christmas morning? What's Lang fixin' to do?" Eyes followed Sol like he was dragging the storm behind him. He stopped a few yards from Jed. "Let the boy go." Jed jerked Micah upright. "Bring me the girl. Simple trade. You know the rules." Aya swayed. "I go," she whispered. "Stop blood." Sol caught her wrist. "You ain't givin' yourself to him." Jed smirked. "She wants to save the kid. Let her." Micah sobbed quietly. "Pa, Sol, don't let him." Before Saul could speak, a voice rang out. "Hold your horses." Ruth stepped through the crowd, jaw set, eyes locked on Lang. She held papers creased with age, accusation in ink. Lang stiffened. "What's that?" "Your sin," Ruth said. She dropped the documents at his boots. "You forged raids to steal Apache land, signed deeds over to Jed's outfit, covered up the killings at Dry Creek." A ripple tore through the gathering. Gasps, murmured curses. Lang's face drained. Jed barked at him. "Shoot her!" Lang didn't move. His deputies traded uneasy looks. One lowered his pistol. Ruth stepped closer. "Truth's out, deputy, and it ain't going back under the dirt." That was the law corrupted at the root. Jed snarled. "I ain't fallen alone." He yanked Micah tighter. "Last chance, Carter. Bring the girl." Aya stepped forward before Saul could stop her. "Trade me. Let boy go." Saul moved in front of her. "No deals." Jed laughed. "Then the kid dies right here." Saul didn't blink. "You touch him, I end you." Jed pressed the blade harder, drawing a thin line of blood across Micah's skin. Aya gasped. "Please." Something inside Saul snapped clean. He pulled the red cloth, the ribbon he'd used to bind Aya's wound, out of his coat and threw it into the snow. The bright strip fluttered like a warning flare. Jed's eyes flicked toward it. Instinct, distraction, greed, something stupid. Saul fired. The bullet slammed into Jed's gun hand, snapping his grip. Micah fell free, Ruth lunging to pull him back. Jed howled, grabbing his wrist. Saul was on him before he hit the ground. They crashed into the snow, fists and boots and rage. Jed clawed, spit, fought dirty. Saul didn't fight to kill, only to stop him, break him, take away the power he'd brandished like a weapon all winter. Lang stepped forward, gun raised. Ruth screamed, "You shoot him, Lang! You damn your own badge!" A deputy grabbed Lang's arm. Another aimed at Jed. The crowd erupted, shouts, accusations, truth crashing against reputation. Jed was dragged off Saul, cursing until a rifle butt ended the noise. Micah ran to Saul, sobbing into his coat. Saul held him close, one arm around the boy, one hand gripping the back of his head like fear might pry him loose again. When Micah quieted, Saul turned. Aya still stood where he left her, shaking, barefoot, blanket slipping. Snowflakes clung to her hair. Her eyes shimmered, not with fever this time, but something raw. He walked to her slowly. "You're safe." Her knees buckled. He caught her, holding her against his chest, the blanket wrapped around both of them. "I no home," she whispered. "No place go." Saul lifted her chin. "Then stay with us, if you choose." Her breath hitched. She nodded. That nod was not survival, but choice. Ruth picked up the red cloth from the snow and tied it to the courthouse rail, bright against the gray morning. A symbol, a start. A page turned, and as snow drifted soft over still water, the whole town watched a black rancher hold an Apache girl close. Not out of fear, not out of duty, but because somewhere between fire and blood and truth, they'd become a family choosing itself.